Okay, yeah. Thanks for the invitation, and I already said that I will try to be very brief, because in fact I wanted to immediately enter into the debate after the things that have been said, because I think that there are a few important elements that were not included in the analysis, and that is always the problem if you come up with figures at aggregate level. Because then, let's say, the picture is watered down very often. What are we discussing here? We are not discussing migration, because since 1958 we have the right for the people that were then living in the European community, the right of free movement. And that is registered also. I try to figure out how many Polish people live in the Netherlands at this moment. 7,000. Officially registered. They have the right of free movement and they've used it. But it doesn't say that also in that Dutch territory we only have 7,000 Polish people or workers or whatever the quality is, how you label them. And that is one of the problems with the statistics. There is an invisible workforce, and I talk now about Polish, but there will be probably also a lot of Belgians that are not registered. There are a lot of Germans that are not registered. There are a lot of Portuguese people that are not registered. And that is, in fact, already one of the fundamental problems if you look at the things that we are discussing. Now, I have tried 2 years ago I wrote a book, and that was with the title In Search of Cheap Labor in Europe. And a lot of people said to me, but this is a provocative title, Jan. And a lot of other people said, no, this is reality. Now, 2 years after, what have we done with in fact, a group of people, partly anthropologists that are doing field work, partly juridical experts, and partly also people, let's say, from the labor inspectorate and so on and so on. We have tried to map a bit what is going on in Europe. And again, I'm talking about EU citizens. We are not talking about migration. Migration would be third country workers coming through to one of our countries. And of course, we still have the exception of Bulgaria and Romania, and there is the restriction, and Bela and his colleagues have demonstrated that the most effective channel, the most effective bypass for the restrictions is to go into the self-employed status. Now, perhaps I should say a few more words about that. In fact, in essence, that demonstrates already that we are not only talking, or we are not talking about free movement of workers, we are talking about the free provision of services in that case. Self-employed can enter the market because there are economic freedoms, and these apply to all countries, and people then can bypass simply the restrictions. And I have tried to find out whether, let's say, an individual worker who lives somewhere in the outskirts of Sofia, all of a sudden thinks, I will start as a self-employed on a building site in Aalst, in Belgium. Do you think that it functions like that? Do you think that people think, okay, that's the way I can enter into Belgium, I will start my one-man band and I will go to Belgium and work in Aalst? No, it's of course not. So there must be a channel of recruitment. There must be more than one channel of recruitment. And we have found a few cases, but I would like to go back first to what Bela has asked me for, the different forms of circumvention. One of these is the cross-border recruitment of temporary workers. Because a lot of the invisible workforce, in Germany we had in the early 90s, people talked about 300,000 people working in agriculture, not being registered, working in the construction sector and so on and so on. That all went through gang masters, through agencies and so on and so on. And we don't have figures. You don't have figures. I cannot find any figures in that respect. The second is the sham self-employment, and there has, or bogus self-employment, however you call it. And there, I said already, there is a link, clear link to free provision of services. We also find a shift to other industries. Last week I was in the Dutch papers because one of the biggest contractors in Europe, also at the stock market, has a daughter company, and this daughter company has a post box in Portugal, and in fact they were registered in that chain in Germany, not in the construction sector but in the cleaning sector, because that's cheaper. Then you simply, Germans have a very nice word for that, that's the Tariflucht. Then you don't have to respect the labor standards and the working conditions of the construction sector, but you are in a cheaper regime, so to say. We have the manipulation with free establishment and country of residence. Actually, there is now a case that will come out by the end of this week, and again I'm involved there, where transport workers in the Benelux hear from their employer that it is better to be on the payroll of a company in Cyprus. That company in Cyprus will then send an invoice to the employer. There is no longer officially a labor relationship between the employer and the transport driver, but of course there is a labor relationship, but that is then, from that moment on, it is denied. Social security is settled through Cyprus. Tax is probably not paid, because I've seen documents where, let's say, the invoice is going directly from Cyprus to the Netherlands or to Belgium, but the payment of the wages is through an administration in Luxembourg, and Luxembourg, it is still a bit covered by the bank secrecy. So there is no real, let's say, volume produced in Cyprus. There is no real volume produced in Luxembourg. There is no tax to be paid. Anyway. And then finally we have the abuse of the posting rules. I've been working on that for 25 years. I don't want to bother you with it once in a while. It's presented as more important. I see it only as one of the forms of circumvention, but what you can find there is people originally were posted because they had quality to add in a chain of production, but nowadays it is also a method of cheap recruitment. People get the minimum wage if they get it, and they work 60 hours. They work 7 days a week. There's a mismatch, and that has been demonstrated by Bela, and so on and so on. Okay, I skipped that. A few cases, I also will skip them, but we had a very famous one, the building of the Council of Europe, that's history. We had Berlin, that's also history. We had Flamanville, it's a bit nearer to. I have a very interesting case in Eemshaven. I don't want to talk about it. I have a small site in Aalst. That was the reason why I used Aalst. I have presented it, but I cannot present it today because the time is not there. There were on that site, it's a small building, there were 111 Belgian contractors and 35 foreign contractors. During an inspection on that site, 11 of the Belgian contractors were there with their workers, and 5 foreign companies were there with their workers. If you analyze what the social inspection in Belgium did, then you will find all the circumvention methods that I just gave in a nutshell. They are all there. There is the Polish self-employed who is completely enrolled, and he's only one of them because he has his own company, he has his own material, and he has different clients, and that's a positive exception. But for the rest, you can find all the other methods of circumvention. Transport, I called it, and Zuckertech is another thing that I will not call.
Just conclude now.
I will, this I will skip, and now the question is, are the instruments that we have, are these EU proof? Well, one of the hammers that the Court of Justice always has said, well, it is, and there is a new case, it is now accepted that instruments and methods of registration, control, and so on, applied by member states in the fight against social fraud in a cross-border context, that they can belong to what is called the so-called public policy provisions. But then the court immediately says, but they have to be proportionate. And who decides on what is proportionate? Now, the latest case on 19th of December has said that the Belgian registration of self-employed who come from abroad is not proportionate. Administrative sanctions are not taken serious, there is a lack of cooperation. And what about trade union action in the cross-border context and support of workers? I will skip this, except for the last word. Are we still waiting for Godot?